Okay, welcome to the call, everybody. This is Noel Lyons of Well Coach Co UK. Today I'm delighted to be talking to Simon B. World-Class Hartley again, and we're going to be talking about understanding what separates world-class people in their field and how you can apply this to your own life, and particularly the 8 key traits to becoming world-class. For over 10 years, Simon has been coaching organisations, teams and individuals to become world-class and to consistently engineer this peak performance, namely mindset, attitude, focus, confidence and motivation. In short, a winning mentality. A consultant sports psychologist within the English Institute of Sport, Simon has coached Olympians, international athletes and professional sportsmen within Premiership Football, Premiership Rugby Union, Super League, Rugby League, First Class County Cricket and motor racing. Simon is the author of Peak Performance Every Time and in August 2012, How to Shine. Welcome to the call, Simon.
Thank you very much.
Now, that's quite a big assertion, isn't it, that anybody can become world-class once they know and start engineering these sort of 8 key traits into their life that you speak about?
Yes, it is. And I think within our society now, there are lots and lots of messages saying you can be anything you want to be and you can be world-class in your field. What I've done over the last couple of years, I mean, as a sports psychologist, I was always intrigued as to what made an athlete world-class, what separated the gold medalist from the silver medalist. And I started to wonder whether the things that I'd seen in world-class athletes also translated into the rest of the population, across the board. So I started looking at world-class people in lots of different domains, lots of different fields, to find out what the common traits were, the things that distinguished them and differentiated them from the other people in their field, from their competition. So I interviewed, for example, a twice Michelin star chef, the world barista champion. Baristas make coffee. James happens to be the world champion. An Olympic finalist, double Olympian athlete, a polar explorer, a mountaineer, a US Navy SEAL, the chief exec of a World Science Organization, to find out what it was that differentiated these guys and what they all had in common. Because my very simple remit, or my simple idea going into it, was that if there are things that all of these people in a really wide variety of disciplines all do and have in common, those things would translate very widely and potentially to everybody. And that if we start to adopt some of these traits ourselves, we could indeed become world-class, or at least become the best we can possibly be and achieve our potential.
Excellent. So it is very diverse, isn't it? All those people you just mentioned. But through this, you have started to find very common traits that they all share. Absolutely.
And do you know, I was alarmed on some occasions, really taken aback by the similarity in the words that they use.
Right.
You know, I was talking to Kenny, who's the twice Michelin star chef, about developing mental toughness in his team. And I was talking to Gary, who's a former US Navy SEAL. And they will describe it almost in exactly the same words, the process that they go through to develop mental toughness in their teams and how they developed it in themselves. You know, the fact that they're in 2 very, very, very different fields is irrelevant. The fact is they both think in very similar ways. And my mission, I guess, from a very personal point of view, is to understand, how do these people think? How do they make decisions? How do they perceive their world? How do they overcome setbacks and approach challenges and, you know, deal with adversity? Those things, I think, help me to understand and therefore everybody else to understand what these guys really do differently and what makes them different from everybody else in their field.
And also, I guess, how much is like innate, something they're born with, how much they develop, how much is due to them, and how much their social conditioning, the people they hang around with.
Absolutely.
It's, you know, coming up with the different mixes, isn't it?
That's right. And they are questions I looked into reasonably extensively. I mean, there's an awful lot written about sort of nature versus nurture and talent versus practice. Lots of these people didn't have a particularly, you know, sort of, they had very modest backgrounds, to be honest. They didn't have a privileged start or anything like that. when you look at the amount of influence that talent really has, Kenny, who's the chef, really hadn't cooked anything until he was about 17, 18 years old. He became a chef after failing to get into the RAF. He wanted to be a pilot. And when I talked to him about his journey to becoming a chef, he started by flunking his exams, didn't make it as a pilot, and started working on fruit and veg stalls. Does that strike you as talent in action?
Right.
He then went on to wash dishes in the kitchen in his uncle's pub, and gradually started doing a little bit of prep work when they needed some help, in the kitchen. Gradually started doing a bit more and understood that actually he enjoyed being in a kitchen. And that enjoyment led him to take a YTS. Do you remember YTS schemes?
Yeah, I'm old enough to.
We're probably the last generation that remember YTS.
Yeah.
So he did 2 years at £35 a week, 60 hours a week, working in kitchens. He was scrubbing potatoes.
And
it is
something I've noticed too. A lot of people seem to fall into their successes over time, whereas there's this, another school that says you have these dreams, you get your life on purpose, and you go after success. There's a very fine line between the two, isn't there?
Absolutely, and lots of the people I spoke to didn't set out with a dream from childhood, which they chased. One or two of them did, sure, but many of them didn't. And actually, I suppose the guy who exemplifies this most is a guy called Andy McMenemy, who's a very good friend of mine. He, on his 50th birthday, completed a world-establishing record. He did 66 ultramarathons in 66 days and established a new world record in the process. But Andy didn't start running seriously until he was 45. So I think he ran his first ever marathon when he was 25 and his second ever marathon when he was 45. And on his 50th birthday, he completed 66 ultramarathons in 66 days and became a world record establishing athlete in the process.
Right. See, I think you've got our attention now then, Simon. Perhaps it's time to start sort of running through these sort of 8 traits, if you like, because these really are the key, aren't they, as you've found with all this research you've put into this?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the first one is have a dream, but like we're saying, it doesn't have to be a dream that you've always had from childhood. I think dreams come to us and develop through our lives. And actually, I was talking to Andy McMenemy this morning on the phone, between what I see is the difference between a dream and a vision. We can visualize things, yes, but when we have a dream, there's an extra dimension that we have, and I think that's an emotional connection to it. I mean, Andy often talked about the sparks of excitement that go off when he conceives of a dream. I mean, when he conceived of Challenge 66, this 66 ultramarathons in 66 days, he did it at probably the lowest physical point that he'll ever be at. It was 18 kilometers from the end of the Namibian 24-hour marathon, and he was in such a bad way physically. And he started to wonder, could I get up tomorrow morning and do this again? That was that first little spark. And then the idea develops. Could I get up? Dean Karnassis did it in the States. He did 50 marathons in 50 days in 50 states. Could I get up tomorrow morning and do this? What would it feel like if I managed to do what Dean did? Could I do more? And then he starts getting excited about the prospect. And then I think it becomes a dream. But one of the really important things, I think, with the idea of having a dream, all of these guys were driven by something equally as powerful to achieve what they have done. And I think it aligns with this dream. And they had an absolute burning passion for it. It wasn't just an idea. They had an absolute burning passion for what they did. And I think that's what gives them the motivational fuel to go on and achieve what they have. They can trip over some hurdles and it doesn't really matter, because they'll get up and they'll go again. They have something that's strong enough, a reason that's strong enough and compelling enough for them to invest into for often many, many years. Chris Cook, who's the double Olympic finalist, is a 100-meter swimmer. And for years and years and years, Chris achieved very, very little. When he was 18, 19, 20 years old, he hadn't even made a national final. He wasn't even one of the best 8 in the country. He finished his career 7th fastest in history in his event. But most people have said, if you haven't made it by 19, you're not going to, you might as well give up. And many, many swimmers do. Chris didn't really achieve anything until into his mid-20s. I don't think he even made the British team until he was about 23. And by that point, most people have said, you've either made it or you haven't. And if you haven't done anything by that point, really, it's too late. But, Chris wasn't in it to be the youngest ever or anything like that. He just was following his passion. He just wanted to be the best swimmer he could possibly be.
Yeah, and we talked a lot about that before in the call you did on Mastering Motivation. I think if people Google your name, which is Simon Hartley, and that's Ley at the end, and then Mastering Motivation, that was a fantastic call you did, and that was all about cultivating that passion.
Absolutely. That for me is the foundation stone. It enables everything else. And I think because these guys are driven by something that they're intrinsically interested in, they are able to focus on the next step. And this is kind of trait number 2 that I found. Being able to focus on each individual step one at a time, not get too far ahead of yourself. One of the big disservices I think that people have received from the personal development industry or the self-improvement industry, whatever you want to call it, is that they have to have a fixed goal, an outcome goal. Actually, these guys often didn't. One of the things that they did exceptionally well is just to focus on what they're doing right now and make sure they do it as well as they possibly can. They're not really tied into a future or an outcome. They just want to get right now done as well as they possibly can. So they're very, very process focused, and they don't find it difficult to focus on the moment, to be in the here and now.
Excellent. And that's really about really knowing and owning yourself, isn't it? And just showing up fully, and often, just seeing where that takes you.
Yeah, definitely. And, from their point of view, if I don't get it right first time, doesn't matter. If I don't get it right second time, doesn't matter. Most of us, if we don't get it right 3 times or 4 times on the trot, if we fail in inverted commas, that's it. Oh God, this thing's too difficult. Ben Saunders, who was the polar explorer, his first ever polar expedition was an absolute travesty, to be honest. He got frostbite. He nearly died. He was hungry. He got attacked by a polar bear. Most people would say, all right, that's it. I'm rubbish at this. I'm not coming back. And he said, got some stuff to learn for next time.
Yeah. And also you blame it. Well, you don't blame it, but you look at external reasons why that was the case. It's never really about you.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, and in a little while, you'll hear that come back as a trait, actually.
Right, okay. Jumping ahead.
Yeah, but you're right.
I'll stick to it step by step here, Simon. Going back to your point number 2.
Point number 3 follows on very logically, actually, because they do focus on the next step. They also simplify things. And I think it's a massive misconception that world-class performance is more complicated in some way. That's not the way they see it. And one of the things that was a real interest to me is to assess how world-class people perceive what they do, how they perceive failure, how they perceive challenges, and how they perceive their job. And most of these guys will say, my job's very, very simple. Now, most external people looking in would say, God, to be a twice Michelin star chef, that's complicated. Right. Kenny says, my job's very, very simple. Andy McMenemy, who ran the 66 ultramarathons, my job's very, very simple. I just need 3.3 million strides, and I've done 66 ultramarathons. So, if I can do 1 stride, I can probably do 3.3 million. It's going to be tough, but it's not difficult. Chris, who's the Olympic swimmer, found that his job, he and I worked as sports psychologist and athlete for about 7, 8 years. And I'm not proud to say it took us about 3 years to figure out what his job was. He's a 100-meter breaststroke swimmer in a 50-meter pool. And although I wasn't an amazing mathematician, it's 2 lengths of the pool as quick as you can. That's it. That's his job. We got caught up in the nonsense. We thought it was to win medals. We thought it was to make the British team. We thought it was to secure sponsorship or funding or this, that, and the other. Nah. His job was very simple. 2 lengths of a pool as quick as you possibly can. And they all have that, view of their job. They've broken it down. They understand the simplicity of it. They're not trying to overcomplicate it. And it makes them incredibly effective at what they do. So, they appear very, very simple, trivial things, these 3 things, be driven by passion. Most people would nod and say yes. But actually, when they question themselves, are they really driven by their passion, or are they doing what pays the bills? Are those 2 the same thing? Are they different? Do people really simplify their job? Do they know it in the simplest possible terms? Do they focus on the next step? These are subtle differences between world-class people and the rest of us, but actually the difference that makes is enormous. A huge difference in the end result and how successful we are.
And especially when all the 8 traits are combined together, the compound effect.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Number 4 is don't compromise. And it's actually probably unrealistic to say don't compromise, because there are always compromises in life. None of these guys have got, unlimited budgets or unlimited time or anything like that. Kenny's a chef. He has to work to profit margins. There are realities in here. But one of the things that these guys are particularly good at is understanding where they can compromise and where they absolutely do not compromise. Kenny said to me once, when chefs cook food, often they're using very, very expensive ingredients. And one of the temptations, if you slightly overcook something or you split a sauce or whatever, if there are expensive ingredients in there, you maybe try and rescue it and serve it anyway. Kenny said, you lose more than the cost of your ingredients if you serve a dish that's not quite right. Because, the chef would say, God, there's a £20 lobster on the plate there. I'm not going to throw it away. Kenny says, accept the hit on the £20 lobster. Do not serve anything that's below quality, below standard, because we lose far, far more than the £20 if we do that. So they have really clear lines. Sometimes they will sacrifice the pound sign, the profit, or if it costs more, that's fine. James, one of the things that might be interesting, if you want to follow this thought process further, I interviewed all of these guys, and there's footage on beworldclass.tv, and I spoke to James Hoffman about things he doesn't compromise on, and he said most people in the coffee industry, he's the world barista champion, and he now owns a coffee roasting company. Most people in the coffee industry sell ground coffee. They sell bags of ground coffee, and James doesn't. And there's a reason for it. He says, if I sell a bag of whole coffee beans, roasted coffee beans, it's going to cost about £7. If I sell a bag of ground coffee beans, it's going to cost about £7. The difference in experience between selling a ground coffee bean and a whole coffee bean is massive. If you grind it yourself and it's fresh and you make yourself a cup of coffee, phenomenal experience. If you use ground coffee, it's an okay experience. And he said, I can't sell bad value for money. I can't sell a below par experience for the same money. I'll just not sell it. I'll ditch the sale. Now, conventional wisdom says that's a market. You service the market. James says, no, you compromise the experience. I'm not going to do it.
Which also ties back into your dream. What it is you're setting out to do, to achieve, to create.
That's right. Absolutely. Absolutely. So, if anybody runs a business or is interested in customer experience, listening to James talking is very, very, very insightful, very valuable. Most of them really understand the details that they have to get right. And they go to incredible lengths to protect those details. Sometimes the details make a difference between life and death. For mountaineers like Alan Hinks, if you get those tiny, tiny details wrong, the knock-on effect, when all the tiny details slip and compound, it means that you might not come back from the mountain. So the smallest things. Alan scrunches his toes every time he takes a step at altitude in sub-zero temperatures. So he steps, scrunch, scrunch, step, scrunch, scrunch. If he doesn't do that, he gets frostbite. If he's getting frostbite and he's in pain and he's 8,000 meters up a mountain in low oxygen and maybe the light's disappearing and he's thinking about the pain in his toes, he's not focusing on what he's doing, he could make a mistake. And mistakes up there could cost you your life, even tiny ones. So, those tiny details that they spend a lot of effort protecting are incredibly important to them. So don't compromise is the fourth. Number 5, all of these guys actively push the envelope. They actively step way outside of their comfort zone often. They don't care whether it doesn't come off. They don't really care whether they fail or make mistakes. They know that if they don't push themselves outside of their comfort zone, they're not going to get any better. They're not going to achieve. From Alan's point of view, his motivation is to climb mountains that are higher and more difficult and more challenging. So he's actively stepping outside of his comfort zone whenever he does that. Whenever he takes on a bigger project or a bigger mountain or, at the moment, Ben, who's the polar explorer, Ben Saunders, is preparing a world record-breaking Antarctic crossing. They're planning to go from the coast of Antarctica to the South Pole and back again, on foot, unsupported, just, men and sleds, no dogs, no motorized machinery, no nothing, which is in itself, it's the most difficult thing that's ever been done in the Antarctic. Everything they do, from sponsorship to logistics to planning to preparation, is pushing the boundaries further than they've ever pushed them before. And they're happy doing that. These people thrive on doing that. So they don't care about failing or making mistakes. They know that if they're not failing and not making mistakes, it's because they're not pushing hard enough. The 6th point kind of ties into that, and it's be mentally tough, which doesn't just mean pushing yourself into physical discomfort or anything like that. Some people shy away from the unknown or uncertainty or things that challenge them particularly hard, tax them, and these guys don't shy away from those. They'll make some incredibly courageous decisions. In James's case, James, world barista champion, within his coffee roasting business, he built a brand up over 3 years, discovered that it probably wasn't quite right, and so he binned it. He just binned it. And it was 90% of his turnover, I think, and about 85% of his profit, or the other way around. And he said, it's not quite right, we're just going to bin it. He describes it as killing off the golden goose. Most people would say, no, I'm not going to bin it, that's too scary. James says, it's not quite right. We're going to find what is right. So we're going to put that one in the bin. So they make some incredibly courageous decisions. They can do it because they're driven by passion. Because getting it right is more important than the outcome. Being as good as they can be is more important than the outcome, so they will do it. The 7th one, which you picked up on earlier, these guys habitually take responsibility fully, because they know that if they don't fully take responsibility for their own performance, they don't take control, and that the two go absolutely hand in hand. It's something that Chris, the Olympic swimmer, and I discovered as we went through his career. Whenever he took responsibility, the amount of control he had over his performance just skyrocketed. Whenever he said, at one time I remember he was in, it might have been a European Championship final or something like that, and he was standing on the blocks. And I don't know if you've ever watched swimming meets, but there's kind of a burp, 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 which is the kind of the gun going off, the ready, steady, go, as it were. And there'd been sort of 2 beeps, and he was just ready to go. And just before the gun was about to fire, the fire alarm in the building went off, and he dived in the pool. You only get 1 start in swimming, so he was disqualified for false starting. And when he got to the end of the lane and climbed out the water, his teammates and his coach and everybody else said, "Oh, you're ever so unlucky there." And he said, "No, that's not luck. There's 7 people still standing on the blocks there, and I didn't. I've got to figure that one out. Today I wasn't quite good enough. If I want to survive in that environment, I've got to be that good and better. So it's not luck." So he took responsibility for his own performance and said, that one doesn't happen again. And that's the difference, I think. That he and the other guys will say, just need to ditch the word blame. It ought to be banned. Because they know that whenever they just ease off taking responsibility fully, they also give up some of their control. The last one is to be yourself. It's absolutely fundamental. I actually think this one underpins all of the others. And that if you don't get this one right, you actually can't enable any of those other things to happen particularly. Because if we want to follow our passion, we have to be true to it. We have to be true to our dream, which means we need to know ourselves and be ourselves and honor our dream. There are lots of people who have a dream, but they don't really honor it fully. There are lots of people who don't really know who they are, so they're not ever going to be able to be true to their dreams. And this one, I think, absolutely underpins them all. And interestingly, when I asked all of these people I asked them what they see in other world-class performers in their field, Chris Cook said something very, very interesting. He said, when I look at other world-class swimmers, the one thing I notice is, he said, it's not an act. They're very, very genuine, very authentic. And that actually underpins world-class performance, I think, in all its facets for me.
Excellent. Perhaps we should just do a quick recap there then, Simon, having gone through those.
Sure.
I mean, number one is like having a burning sort of passion or a dream that's going to develop over time. Number two, not to get carried away with that, to take it step by step. To see where that takes you. Because number three, you're going to simplify everything, which is basically what any master does in any field. They make the complex seem very simple. Number four, I actually call it like clear boundaries. So there's no compromises. You know what's what. 5 is pushing beyond your comfort zone, so you're in the growing zone.
Yeah.
Always. Number 6, mentally tough. It's really about being ready for whatever shows up, isn't it?
Absolutely. And be able to make... I wrote a blog piece recently, and one of the things I've noticed about... We were talking about talent at the beginning, the influence that talent plays. I wrote a blog article called It's PDA, Not DNA. It's perceptions, decision, and action that makes world-class people, not deoxyribonucleic acid.
Excellent.
And part of that, for me, it starts with a P. How do you perceive things? Do you perceive it as a risk? Because if you perceive something as a risk, you're going to approach it very differently than if you don't perceive the risk at all. If you perceive something as impossible, you probably won't even start. If you just perceive it as something that nobody's ever done yet, then you might. So, and that, for me, actually underpins mental toughness in many ways. You know, how do people perceive physical pain? Some people perceive it as a showstopper. Andy McMenemy, the ultramarathon runner, he ruptures his Achilles tendon on day 2 of 66 ultramarathons. He was in some pain. He was in accident and emergency on day 26, but he ran on day 27.
And I know a friend who's on crutches for over 6 weeks with the very same thing.
Yeah, and for him that's not a showstopper. It's quite inconvenient and it hurts a bit, but it's not the reason to stop.
Yep. Excellent. So number 7 was taking full responsibility, and that's really about being empowered, isn't it? That it's up to you, which really comes back to, as you say, the key point for all of this is fully honouring and knowing yourself, really showing up as being authentic.
Absolutely.
Okay, so Simon, I know you could go a lot deeper into all of these, and not only that, but for each person it's quite different, and that's really the work you do, customising it to different people, different fields. But as you say, the principles are the same.
Absolutely, and lots of people, everybody's got different starting points with this. Organisations are very diverse as well. Helping build this into the fabric of an organisation is a very, very interesting challenge from my point of view, because, in themselves, organisations are very interesting, very diverse things. So, yeah, it's a great challenge.
Excellent. So for those who've had their curiosity piqued today and would like to know more, where could they go?
If you want to listen to these guys and actually hear the words they say and get an insight into how they think, there's footage of 5 interviews that I conducted with the contributors to my book. That's on www.beworldclass.tv. So you'll hear Kenny Atkinson talking about how he develops standards within a team, and you'll hear James Hoffman, the world barista champion, talking about the finest details. And you'll hear Bruce Duncan, who's a mad adventure racer that's done some crazy, crazy events, talking about mental toughness. And Chris talking about the concept of talent and how he became the 7th fastest in history with really no natural talent at all. And Kia, who's head of performance at England Squash, who we haven't mentioned yet, talking about how you develop a world-class organisation that's stayed ahead of the rest of the world for over 15 years. Which is an incredible feat in itself. They probably are, England Squash probably are the single most successful organisation in the sporting world. And he talks about how they stay ahead. So all of that's online, beworldclass.tv. And obviously it's all embellished slightly more within the book, within How to Shine, which hits the shelves in August.
Fantastic. Well, we started the call with saying that anybody can become world class. And hopefully that's a lot clearer now because, as you say, these 8 sort of traits, these 8 sort of principles, they're literally available to anybody who's ready, willing to step up. Absolutely. It's a change in your own mind and your own thought process that triggers these. Yeah. Brilliant. Simon, always good talking to you. And pleasure. Thanks for the call today. No problem whatsoever. It's been my pleasure. And be world class, everybody. It's